सेकेंड एक्ट का प्लेटफॉर्म लाया है एक और बारी इतनी अमेजिंग पर्सनालिटी टुडे. आई कैन नॉट जस्ट वेट टू इंट्रोड्यूस यू. This is Eika Chaturvedi Banerjee. She says, don't miss the Chaturvedi in it. So I am going to emphasize on the Chaturvedi bit right now. Her incredible work of bringing the mythology into the modern world, how we can just learn from whatever we have forgotten and just trying to become too modernized is something that she makes us grounded back into it and also explains in a very beautiful, what should I say, all the learnings that she brings with it. I think you can't wait to know. So Eika, I know that I haven't introduced you fully. I would not want to do anything which I miss out. So there's so much to know about you. So welcome. This is such an exciting podcast. I'm waiting for you. You're a ball of energy, I know. And I know that there's so much which will come out of a conversation, especially for women.
Yes, thank you so much, Archana. I am just hoping that we can serve humanity as a whole, unsegregated into men and women. But women are much more interesting and far greater fun to work with. Thank you for having me on Second Act. And I have a feeling by the time we end this, you will also have Act 3. Huh? You might want to think about that.
Yes, of course.
So why don't I tell you about myself very briefly through my life journey itself. I am on what I call my third life right now. My first life began actually around the age of 13. उससे पहले तो हम बच्चे होते हैं, मतलब we just reflect what our parents are. It's actually around the age of 13 that your own self starts emerging. You start becoming your own person, your likes, your dislikes, etc. And that's probably why adolescence is such a difficult age.
It is.
So I discovered at 13 that I was a healer. And then I did what every other teenager does, which is go into denial and anger and resentment and rebellion and at war with the world, and I will prove a point to the world. And so it was a rather extended teenage, so that was about 20 years. I made choices because I didn't want to embrace myself, because I didn't want to talk to myself, because I didn't want to know who this creature emerging inside of me was. I created a lot of external noise. So I used to wear these grunge baggy shirts and grunge 4G DMS boots to college and all of that.
Very modern.
Very, very macho.
Okay.
So I did all of that. And I had wanted to study sciences, but studied economics because economics was cooler. I did an MBA, got a corporate job, all of which was cool. I was just dying to earn your respect and your love. So I would do everything that was cool to the outside.
Right.
Thankfully, there were moments of what then seemed like insanity, but which I'm very grateful for in hindsight. One fell in love, one got married, one had kids very quickly. At that point of time, all of that seemed very uncool. But I'm very grateful for those.
Okay.
Right? खैर तो 20 साल की वो ज़िंदगी रही where I was at war with the world, just proving a point, and frankly did well too. So did an MBA, blue chip MBA, was a banker for the longest time. So very blue chip corporate job. मतलब अगर बाहर से आप हमारी ज़िंदगी देखते तो बहुत ही poster perfect ज़िंदगी थी वो. Except that, and I think that's where the quest began, to say that if it is such a poster perfect ज़िंदगी, I'm leading the life that the script demanded of me, then why was I unsatisfied and why was I not feeling that happiness from within?
Right.
And I realized that I had created so much of noise around me. I was so much at war with the world that I had completely blocked myself out. Right. So that continued for a while. And then there were a couple of trigger incidents that happened. When our second daughter was born, we didn't know whether she would live or die for the first couple of years, and I think that's when that's the first time that the helplessness sunk in. Right, so there was this one time where all her metrics were awry, everything that could go off was wrong, all the markers were off, and I remember looking at her and feeling so upset with myself because I was meant to have been her healer. And yet I had spent so much of time whining and crying and cribbing that I had lost the capability to heal. I had never indulged in that. वहाँ से I think realization शुरू हुआ, but उसके बाद भी I did nothing for almost about 2 years. That's when we shifted to Singapore. Singapore was my first entrepreneurial stint when I stepped off the corporate ladder for the first time, set up a wealth advisory firm, etc. And I think towards 2 years in Singapore, actually you suddenly released all that 9 hours, 10 hours of energy जो आप office में spend करते थे. You suddenly released that amount of time and energy. With that energy, I think then you naturally started questioning yourself. I still did nothing about it, but at least
that question came.
it started surfacing. The dissatisfaction, the unfulfillment started surfacing. Yourself started emerging, as it always does.
Yes. That's what I was going to say.
It does.
That's the beginning of
get away
things.
with it, huh? So I think that started surfacing. I still did nothing about it, and then I had a very nasty road accident in Singapore. It was almost like Bhagwan ji gave you one, tight slap ki samajh mein nahi aa raha hai kya tumko. So that happened, and I think that sort of forced the gestation of the rebirth, right? Forced that pregnancy of the rebirth. It still took about 2 years from that time. So I spent the first 6 months just embracing myself, because suddenly it wasn't about healing anybody else. It was about healing your own self. It was about survival. That's also, Archana, when I realized that I had lost the right for life to say to somebody कि मैंने तुम्हारे लिए किया और तुमने मेरे लिए नहीं किया. Because there was so much that I received in that time. That's when I went back to yoga and meditation and dhyana, which, by the way, both my parents are yogis. My father's Fauji, and both of them are yogis. Mother was a journalist. I'm very grateful for my parents. I'm just so grateful for the parents we have and the upbringing we have.
So nice.
So they were both yogis. So बचपन में कभी सिखाया होगा 2.5-3 साल की उम्र पे, but obviously you did nothing about it. So I went back to that. We then also shifted back to India. So I spent all these patterns, by the way, make sense only in hindsight. None of it was making sense then. Then I spent the next 6 months repaying my social and emotional debts. So I went back to the mountains. I went back to my roots. I went back to old school teachers, principal friends, just closures. So did that for a while. And I think the debt that wasn't still resolved was the corporate debt. So I did join a job. And 9 months later,
I love it when you say corporate debt. We will talk more about it. ये मुझे resonate कर.
I must. So went back to the corporate world, and I think 9 months or later when I quit, मुझे अभी भी वो दिन याद है, पता है अर्चना, that was the day I stepped into my second life. The day I quit, उस दिन शाम को मेरी एक friend का birthday था, तो हम लोग उसके घर पे पार्टी पे थे. But I remember that emotion so vividly. I was empty. I was just empty. मतलब वो कहते हैं ना, I had paid all my debts to the world. I didn't owe anybody a thing. Nobody owed me a thing. And I had nothing left in me. No aspiration, no ambition, no love, lust, desire, nothing. I was just khali. And it was that day कि had I died and gone to heaven, and I would have of course gone to heaven. That was non-negotiable.
अच्छा.
हाँ.
ये तो बहुत confidence है आपको.
बिल्कुल. But I would have gone on a zero P&L. So उस दिन से I think that marked my first.
लोग मर रहे हैं but P&L नहीं छोड़ेंगे.
नहीं वो तो यार मतलब कुछ तो benchmark
P&L तो करना ही.
Zero. Karmic ledger zero. But what I did learn that day. So 2 things happened that day. One is of course that I stepped into my second life, and because you were completely khali, so the joy of filling it was glorious, because you filled up. There was nothing that needed to overflow, right? You were khali. So you took in only that which you wanted, that gave you joy, that happiness, that fulfillment. It was just beautiful.
Isn't that called conscious living? Which we all strive for. So that's when I started.
Correct. So if I and I think we will talk about this further. So the first life was the dark ages of denial, of anger, of resentment, of rebellion, of being at war with yourself. And that war manifests at every stage, and we will come back to this. The second life was exploratory, was embracing. That's when I learned to figure out कि तुम कौन हो, क्या हो, चाहती क्या. All those questions that I had bottled up, which I could now deal with far greater maturity and experience.
Wow.
So those questions came back. Who am I? Why am I? What am I doing? Etc. I re-educated myself. So I went back and trained myself on neurosciences, psychology, anthropology, sociology, mythology.
क्या रह गया?
Right, mythology. So that is when mythology entered my life. So I am a certified mythologist. I actually went and studied this. And I think mythology, because of 2-3 reasons that sort of stuck. First was when I'd explored a lot of what the Western science understands about the human mind.
Yeah.
I figured कि हमें न्यूरोसाइंस, इलेक्ट्रिसिटी, बायोकेमिस्ट्री समझ में आती है, बट हमें थिंकिंग, मोटिवेशन, डिजायर, फियर्स, इनसिक्योरिटीज शायद उतने
The
नहीं समझ में
emotion
आते हैं.
part.
Right?
Yes.
And therefore, I said, look, here is a set of scriptures that belong to a civilization that has at least 5,000 years of documented history and at least 10 to 12,000 years of undocumented history.
Right.
तो कुछ तो survival hack किया ही होगा crack, right? So that's when I went back and explored this to say, how much do we understand about the human mind here? And it was unbelievable. It's unbelievable how well and how scientifically we've understood the human being and the universe and the principles. So for me, our mythology or our ancient wisdom became the most tangible unit to study the human being and their value belief systems. So that's how I ended up here and got myself recertified as a coach and did all my practicing behavior analyst certifications, everything, just to understand कि हम क्या समझते हैं about intervening at the human being level. And not because of human being, but because human being as the unit of society. So what do we understand? And therefore, if I can figure this, marry it with that, explore, nibble at the edges of this, see where I can contribute in actually helping people achieve their resonance. And therefore, whether you're a person and extrapolate it to team, society, organization, jo bhi ho, whatever be your level, principles wahi hai, first principles wahi hai. So did that. That was actually my second entrepreneurial act.
Wow.
So ran a leadership development firm focusing on gender. So a lot of work on women empowerment, financial security, safety, leadership, etc. A lot of work on leadership development, and the third piece was management and mythology. I was quite willing to wait it. I knew कि यार ये सत्य तो यही है. Now whether it gets accepted when it becomes cool, वो देखा जाएगा. So did that, set up my second firm. Actually, interestingly, within 2 years of having set up this and starting this journey, I was actually very blessed that I actually got offered the role of the CEO of one of India's largest skilling and employability companies.
Wow.
With Future Group. And अच्छा ना पता है, literally वो कहते हैं ना कर्मण्येवाधिकारस्ते. I actually realized that because I had stopped chasing, which is what I was doing in my first act, which is what I was doing in my dark ages, right? Chase, get, achieve, fight.
So much to know from here. Yeah.
This time, I was actually just focusing on doing. This was my age of karma. The first one was kshetra, right? This one was about karma. This was about actually just doing on a daily basis what I wanted to do and allowing the universe to act, right? And when I did that, Archana, like I said, I actually made the first CEO of my B school batch, right? And I think that happened because I wasn't chasing it, and because I only had gratitude for it, and I had no selfish interest, I had no vested interest. वो एक journey खत्म हो गई थी कि जिसमें मैं वो chase कर ही नहीं रही थी, right? I didn't join that job for either money or career or being cool. It was because of the impact I would have had. In fact, I remember having a conversation with my husband where I told him, I said, yeah, Anjana, when I accept this job, but I feel like I'm cheating on my own self and my company. So he started laughing. He said, एक इसको ऐसे देखो कि जहाँ पे तुम काम कर रही हो इस समय अपनी कंपनी में, तुम X एफर्ट, Y एफर्ट डालोगी और उसका 4x, 5x इम्पैक्ट होगा. He said, whereas here, for maybe 4x, 5x effort, it's allowing you 50y impact. Right. So he said, so think of it as your impact.
कोई ऐसा सोचता नहीं है. So really, it's commendable because हम अपना काम करते हैं, तनख्वाह लेते हैं और घर जाते हैं.
हाँ. So I think that was the first transcendence, that shift from darkness and following the script and kshetra and anger and you know, actually जब हम angry वगैरह, and we will, like I said, talk about this whole idea of kshetra and how we manifest our shadows. This yuga was the yuga of karma, right? So it took about 8 years. I was the CEO of this company, huge impact, but very fulfilling. But somewhere, and you know, I was nibbling. I didn't have articulation for this because वो जो journey शुरू करी थी second birth, rebirth पर, second life mein, was I needed to play in this space.
Wow.
But I didn't know what. Matlab, how do you articulate what you wanted to do? Because in the current expression of ancient wisdom, there are only two expressions. So one is your very soul searching and the guru expression and the focus, the very new age guru of Deepak Chopra, Robin Sharma types at one end. And on the other hand was faith based, right? So there was religion, there was faith, there was that expression of Brahma Kumari, Sri, Art of Living. Whereas in my worldview, this needed to be not an exotic alternative, but mainstream. It's a way of life.
Yes.
Right? So जैसे जब हम लोग ने MBA किया था, तब एक Japanese quality control tool होता था, called Kaizen. And Kaizen, when we did our MBA that many decades ago, was an exotic quality control tool. Right? But today, if you're setting up a manufacturing facility, and you're not Kaizen compliant or Six Sigma compliant, you might as well not be there, right? It's not an exotic alternative any longer. It's the mainstream way of life. And that's what I wanted to do, but I didn't have an articulation for it. खैर तब तक नौकरी भी हो रही थी, बहुत exciting चीज़ें हो रही थी life में. And then in 2018, I was privileged to be selected as the British government runs these fellowships called the Chevening Fellowships.
Okay.
So I was very privileged to be selected as one of the Chevening Gurukul Fellows on Leadership and Excellence. So it's a very small cohort of 12 mid to senior leaders who are selected for impact. मतलब आपका scale और impact कितना होगा. Those 3 months in Oxford, which is 2018 November, September to December, is actually when the second rebirth happened. That's how I stepped into my third life. And I have to share this journey with you.
Yes.
So I still remember it was one, early November post Diwali day. It was that classic UK grey, rainy, horrible.
It was just UK.
It was just UK in November days. And I remember waking up, Archana, and looking outside and saying, "Kitni brightness hai."
Wow.
Suddenly there was this light of conscious clarity. And I had this grin stuck on my face like that. And I still remember I had my first meeting that day at 8:30 in the morning with my coach. And she was this 65-year-old woman dealing with her husband's cancer remission and Gora. So she looked at me and she said, "Eika, something's happened," right? I was like, I just kept grinning and she said two things that have stayed with me. So if my learnings from the transition from the first life to the second were about being empty and filling yourself with what you needed to fill,
right,
and being aware of your emotions and studying them, these two messages that Heather left with me that day. So first she said, Eika, it's like you were pregnant with something for the last year and a half. And this 3 months here is your period of delivery and confinement.
Wow, so beautiful.
And then she said, so हमारे ना psychology में हम लोग कहते हैं कि every child that's born is a wounded child. They've already been through a battle. So she said, Eika, this time when you're nursing the wounded child, don't forget to heal the injured mother. They're both you. Archana, that stayed. That stayed.
I'm getting goosebumps in that.
No, it was just glorious. So that's how I stepped into my third life. I came back to India.
Wow.
It still took me another 2 years to tie up the loose ends, the job, figure out how we were going to transition the company, etc., have a chat with Kishore Bayani ji, etc. And then I exited. So this is my third life. This third life is just grace and gratitude. There are no blacks and whites. There's only white. There's no fearless.
Wow.
There's no fear. There's no insecurity. There is just grace and gratitude, Archana. It's just all white. There are no blacks and whites or grays. It just is. I've just stepped into it, and that's all there is. Like I said, I just turn up. This is the life where I show up. This is a life where I don't say, where there are no negatives in my life. This is a life where I say yes. This is a life where just grace and gratitude. Just grace and gratitude. And that's why I wanted to share with you about, these 3 acts and how I'm actually on my third life and just grateful for it.
I'm still immersing with everything that you're saying. I normally don't get like so involved in every word, literally. And I honestly feel that power. It's not that you're saying it, somebody who just drops in like today and just says, okay, you tell me, what are you ready to do with me? I mean, who does that? In this whole age of being feared of कि मेरे से कोई कुछ ले लेगा, मेरी नॉलेज ले लेगा, मेरा क्लाइंट ले लेगा, मेरा
मैं गरीब हो जाऊंगा.
हाँ, here you come and says चल बता क्या करेगी मेरे साथ.
So actually I must tell you on this note कि हम Eikam पे क्या करते हैं, right? So that's how Eikam happened. Eikam is, as we say, the wisdom organization from India for the world. Why do we exist? We exist for your resonance. Who are you? You could be an individual, a team, a unit, a nation, a civilization, whatever your unit be. हम ये कैसे करते हैं? हम ancient wisdom use करते हैं. हम ancient wisdom क्यों use करते हैं? One, like I said, that we truly believe that for a civilization that has existed as long as it has, we've cracked some survival hacks. But more importantly, if I have to help you become the best version of yourself, we need to know who you really are. Stripped of who you think you are, who you think you should be, who the world thinks you should be, who you think you should be, etc., etc., etc. And to that end, your value belief systems, your mythology, your blood memory, your civilizational DNA is the most tangible unit of who you are. If I can find out कि तुम कौन हो. क्योंकि अगर हम वहाँ से नहीं ऑपरेट किया ना तो क्लास 10th की फिजिक्स में हमने रेजोनेंस पढ़ा था. अगर आप नेचुरल फ्रीक्वेंसी पे नहीं हो, अगर सरफेस लेवल पे we keep adding layers and brushing and polishing and whatever else it is, of course it will shine and polish.
Right.
But that's not resonance. You will not, spontaneously ignite into your glorious, brilliant self.
But बहुत often नहीं होता because we are in this whole coaching thing that people don't know firstly who they are. No. They don't know who they want to be. They don't know what the world should perceive of them. These are still great questions.
Yeah.
These अगर यही सबको समझ में आ जाए तो फिर
We've arrived.
We've arrived.
Isn't it? So and therefore, I think what we work with to begin with, and that's why that's been my learning from my 3 ages. That वो जो पहली वाली age थी ना, of the dark ages, that was a manifestation of all my shadows. And so we very often talk about the fact that, and this is called kshetra. Kshetra होता है जब आप अपने, so derived from chapter 13 of the Bhagavad Gita, which is about kshetragya yoga, where Bhagwan Shri Krishna says that kshetra वो है जो तुम्हारे कंट्रोल में है. तुम्हारे कंट्रोल में क्या है? तुम्हारे 3 शरीर, your body, your emotions, mind, and your intellect, your buddhi, viveka. Beyond that, everything that's not your kshetra is the kshetragya, surrender. इसको वेस्ट में हम लोग बड़े पावरफुली कहते हैं, दिस इज द थ्योरी ऑफ लोकस ऑफ कंट्रोल थ्योरी, राइट, वेयर when we are operating from concern, not control, we operate from a sense of helplessness.
Right.
So this is what manifests as anger, as panic and fear, as insecurities, as jealousies. All of that is outside of you when you're operating from concern, not control. Right? So the first step है जो कह रही है ना आपकी, पता ही नहीं चलता हमको कि मतलब कुछ और होना भी चाहिए.
सही बात है.
It's about being aware of your emotions. It's about knowing that when you're angry because you're feeling the helplessness of something that's within you but is not you.
Yeah, this is so powerful. This is so powerful.
And so I realized, for instance, when I patterned my anger, I realized that लोग बहुत चीज़ों के लिए नाराज हो सकते हैं, but at the end of every time that I was angry, hurt, upset, there was a person. वही जो मैं कह रही हूँ ना, which is also important for me to say कि मैंने तुम्हारे लिए किया, तुमने मेरे लिए नहीं किया. I am hurt, I am disrespected, because I realized that my shadow was लोग क्या कहेंगे. Right? I had spent my life proving a point to the world. मतलब I had to earn your respect. You needed to think I was cool, right? So that approval-seeking behavior was my shadow, right?
So I want to break the thought here, and I want to ask you. So this is what 99.9999% people go through even today.
क्या लोग क्या कहेंगे? नहीं, सबके अलग अलग होते हैं.
हाँ,
सबके अलग अलग होते हैं. कुछ लोगों का financial
नहीं, this
insecurity
whole
होता है.
thing about तो it's this whole thing about validation, this whole thing about कि मुझे respect दो, expectation. So what has your learning been, especially when you work with people? How does one really align within oneself?
Good question. So like I said, उसके 3 steps हैं. पहला step is just being aware of your emotion.
Right.
अगर तुम नाराज हो रहे हो किसी चीज़ पर, उसको एग्जामिन कर लो कि तुम क्यों हो रहे हो, right? And shift from concern to control. So for instance, कोविड है, पैनिक है, हर आदमी मतलब बहुत हाहाकार मचा हुआ है, etc etc. कंसर्न मैं कुछ नहीं कर सकता उसके बारे में. How do you shift from concern to control? What can I do about it? I can make sure that I've masked up. I can make sure my hands are sanitized. I can make sure I maintain isolation. I'm at home and I maintain 6 feet distance. You shifted from concern to control. मैं नाराज हूँ कि मेरा बॉस मुझे प्रमोशन नहीं दे रहा. And I will blame the boss. I will get upset about it, etc etc. All that is concern. Because the more difficult one is shifting to control. Have I delivered on my targets? Have I communicated to my manager that I've delivered on my targets, etc. Right? So that shift from concern to control is the first thing. मैं क्या कर सकता हूँ उसके बारे में? Have I done everything I could do? Right? Or being upset that my parents are not looking after their health. Right? And therefore being concerned कि यार देखो कैसे कर रहे हैं, क्या कर रहे हैं, और झगड़ा हो रहा है हर बार. What can I do about it? I can make sure कि घर के हर सीढ़ी पे सैनिटाइजर रखा होगा, उनके डॉक्टर के अपॉइंटमेंट्स हो गए. I can sack their driver so that they have no car available to go out. I can do all of those things, make sure medical checkups happen, all of that.
Right.
But beyond that, letting go.
Yeah.
To say, this is not on me. This is on you. Everybody is a thinking adult.
Yeah. You were so right.
So that the first one is, actually the first one is not even letting go. The first one is just stepping into yourself. So monitoring and being aware of just your emotions. I was the angry young woman for a reason. Because I was angry with myself. It wasn't the world I was angry. That anger is coming from being unhappy within. So watch for your emotions. That's the first step. The second step linked to that, and which is I was telling you, when I realized that when I watched my emotions, I realized that I was angry every time there was a person at the other end. So, लोग क्या कहेंगे? Approval seeking, किसी को बुरा ना लग जाए, तुम्हारा मेरे लिए, तुम्हारी, your my need for you to think I'm cool, and you respect me, all of that, right? वो epiphany तो हो गई when you track this pattern. Now comes the second stage. That second one is the process of karma, right? जब हम अपने कोर से ऑपरेट नहीं कर रहे होते हैं, तो हम एक स्कैफोल्डिंग बना लेते हैं अपने सामने, which becomes those beliefs that we hook ourselves onto. तो याद है जब हम बचपन में ना एक वो टॉय होता था सीजी वाला, वो बर्ड होती थी, डिपिंग बर्ड होती थी, which used to go पट 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 पट, go into water and come back. Right? In modern day they have hit me toys for kids, by the way, just so you know. So they are the ones that you punch and they come back because the core is inside them. Center of gravity is the principle. Right? Same is true for us. If you're standing straight, you're standing straight. When you bend forward, your CG shifts, and the moment it shifts out of you, you tumble and fall over. Same thing. Kshetra allows you to come into your core, and get your CG inside of you. If that core is not inside of you, then you will need to find balance and scaffolding and support systems, because otherwise you will fall over.
Right.
तो ये जो scaffolding और ये बड़ा सुंदर सा जो हम framework create करते हैं कि दुनिया कैसी हो, right? How the world should be, must be. Those are how what is right, what is wrong, etc. These are those limiting frameworks we hook ourselves onto.
So true.
That's what you need to let go. Now, much easier said than done. How do you do it? So for me, for instance, the journey was, you must respect me. I must do the right thing, right? So in my worldview, I must be nice to people. People must respect me. Epiphany तो हो गई, but how do I let go of that? तो fear क्या है मेरा? Fear ये है कि अगर मैंने ये जान, I don't know any better. This is the only filter and scaffolding through which I've seen the world.
So true.
So if I let go of my need for your approval and validation, then I will become obnoxious and selfish and rude. How can I become that? Right? Because I don't know any better.
Yeah.
But as Mountain Dew famously said, and no, they're not paying me for this. डर के आगे जीत है. I did make those efforts, and I'll tell you how we make those efforts. But when I made those efforts, I realized, Archana, and it was unbelievably liberating, that letting go of my need for your approval did not make me obnoxious and selfish and rude. On the other hand, it liberated me to love you.
Absolutely.
Suddenly, I could love you not for something that I wanted from you, but truly just be love. Suddenly, it wasn't about saying I love you to you because you needed to say it back to me.
Yeah.
But because I just love you. कोई काउंटर पार्टी नहीं है इसमें.
सही बात.
अब तुम मुझे किस चीज से डरा लोगे और किस चीज से मतलब what will I hide behind, right? So suddenly I am love.
बहुत खूबसूरत है.
My husband.
ये feeling ही बहुत liberating है. More than doing it, feeling it is so liberating.
अर्चना, मुझे अभी भी याद है कि जब पहली बार मुझे ये, and it was a journey. मतलब I'm of course making it sound easy.
No.
But it was an everyday journey. But getting here, Archana, it was like the feeling that you get when your ears are blocked and the pop suddenly opens.
Yeah.
So it's actually that feeling like something just went plook.
Yeah.
And
actually it's a split of a second switch, isn't it?
You're
sitting on something, holding on so tight, and once you've decided, no, I need to change my mindset, and it just slips.
It just slips.
And everything else starts getting
It's just so sahaj then. Yeah. And so that was my second one about karma. Now, the journey is about basically, so if the first one, if Kshetra, identifying your Kshetra and coming from concern to control, is about being aware of your emotions and distilling them, which is easier said than done. The process of karma is about trusting the process.
Yes.
About staying in the here and the now. Yeah. About letting go of should, must, supposed to, right, wrong, good, bad. Yeah. And stepping into what is. Yeah. The practice of it is being aware of your words. So every time you use these words, should, supposed to, I am right, you're wrong, good, bad, this is good, this is bad, you realize, and it's a journey within your own self. So koi counterparty hai nahi. Where you ask yourself, why am I doing this? Like I realized that as the mother. Because I was so busy. Remember, बचपन में हमको पढ़ाते थे आदर्श विद्यार्थी, आदर्श नेता. ऐसी ना एक इमेज होती है आदर्श लीडर, आदर्श वाइफ, आदर्श मदर वाली.
वो तो है. We want to be the best.
I am the best.
The best.
And by the way, the best is not about the best of me. I want to be the best externally. I must be too cool, man.
Yeah.
The cool first time. First. So I realized that because I was a working mother, I used to carry this huge hawa of good mother. कहीं मैं bad mother ना बन जाऊँ और ना दिख जाऊँ. So much so कि मुझे याद है कि हम जब carpool run करते थे अपने बच्चों के लिए when they used to go to school, and there were 4 cars and I was the only working mother. And when I sat down and tallied at the end of the month, I had done far more than my share of duties. Because कहीं इनको ऐसा ना लगे कि ये working mother है, unavailable रहती है. I had attended more birthday parties. Because ऐसा ना लग जाए. I used to really scream at my children, right? कि brush कर लो, धो लो, homework करो. Yes. Till I realized that, I am not the whiny types. Right? And I remember the kids were very young; they were 7 and 10. When I actually had this conversation and this shedding of baggage, to say letting go. So my judgment was not about whether it's good for the child or not.
It was about me.
लोग कहेंगे कि ये bad mother है. The moment I let go of that cage of what a good mother must be, then I was able to have a conversation with my children to say, भाई देखो ऐसा है. That's the person I am. ऐसा है कि तुम ब्रश नहीं करोगे ना रात को, तो मेरे दांत नहीं खराब होंगे. My teeth are fine. You will go to the dentist. You will be in pain. Or if you don't do your homework, मैं illiterate नहीं रह जाऊंगी, मैं अनपढ़ गंवार नहीं रह जाऊंगी, मैं पढ़ाई कर चुकी हूँ. तुम्हें डांट पड़ेगी, तुम करो. So that's the stage of letting go, right? The first one is about stepping into yourself, and the second is about letting go. So therefore, that shift will allow me to say, what can I do about it? I have taught you how to brush. There is toothpaste, there is toothbrush, there is towels, and there is running water in your bathroom. Now it's on you. And I still remember that 7-year-old looking at me and saying, "But I'm a child." I said, so? No, it's your job. अच्छा ऐसे इतना पता है तो मुझे जाके ब्रश करके क्यों नहीं कर लेती हो?
सही बात है.
Right? So that's that second stage, right?
But then we also are so guilty about not doing things.
Correct.
So I remember my daughter was always telling me that all the mothers come to teach in substitutes and you never come. So I used to be so guilty of it कि I'm the only mother who doesn't go and substitute. अरे भाई मैं तो नौकरी भी तो करती हूँ, मैं तो यहाँ होती भी नहीं हूँ.
Correct.
And I remember my son would not study, so the teachers will call to say ये नहीं पढ़ा. And then पहले I used to feel really ashamed and then ऐसे करके जाती थी. उसके बाद मैंने उनको बोलना चाहिए कि पढ़ाई मैं नहीं कर रही हूँ क्या? मैंने तो नहीं बोला उसको नहीं पढ़ने के लिए, तो मेरे को क्यों बुला के डांटा जाता है? मेरी क्या रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी?
नहीं, मैंने घर पूरा I've enabled the household कि भाई वाईफाई नहीं चलता, मतलब वाईफाई ऑफ कर दिया है, नेटवर्क नहीं है, बच्चा घर पे पढ़ रहा है, टाइम दे दिया, सब दे दिया, तो मतलब अब आप करो यार.
Exactly.
मैं तो by the way
उसको समझने में भी वक्त लग जाता है मुझे लगता है.
हाँ. So I had
everything is a process.
home, I still remember where with the kids and they were really young, they were even younger that time, where I used to say ऐसा है कि with everything that we do, my hour of 9 to 10 is yours. So उस 9 से 10 का समय, actually 8 से 9 is what, because 8:30 to 9:30 because they sleep. बॉम्बे है, आते आते टाइम लगता है, कहीं पे भी है यार, कमिटमेंट्स है, जो भी है, 8:30 to 9:30 is your time. Now, if you haven't, you can decide how we use that time.
Yeah.
Right? So we can either use that time in you brushing, packing bags, setting uniform, khana, nahana, etc. Or if you can finish all of that on your time, then our time becomes more meaningful. Then we'll sit, read stories, chat, gossip, have friend conversations, life conversations. What is hurting you? Teacher did this, so and so bad, I felt so good. I said, then we can do that. But we can't do both.
Very intelligent.
Oh, and so by the way, that also.
So you were becoming a coach by default anyway.
Motherhood is between being a mother, a CEO, a wife, a daughter. I think there's enough coaching that happens any which ways.
Yeah. So I want to come to the question later, maybe, that was it the reason for you to work with women because you started to work with them? Because
so let me, Archana, come back to this one after I finish that third 3-step process, because there's a very interesting answer there. So the second step is karma. The third step, so that is what I did in my second life. Question, embrace, explore, etc. So kshetra ho gaya, karma ho gaya. The third life, which is this life, is the life of kriya. जो हम grace or gratitude कह रहे हैं ना.
Right.
Which is where the West calls it neuroplasticity, because the brain does not understand a no. Right? हम असतो मा सद्गमय पढ़ते थे.
Of course.
So you don't take away darkness. You just introduce light. You don't take away lies. You just introduce the truth. So this life has been about, like I said, showing up. This life has been about just saying yes and exploring possibilities. Because the brain doesn't understand a no. And that's an example I use very often. Okay, Archana, close your eyes.
करूँ?
हाँ करो. 10 seconds के लिए. Close your eyes. Close your eyes into anything, but don't think of pink monkeys. Do anything, Archana, but don't think of pink monkeys.
I'm thinking of yellow banana.
No, Archana, do anything, but don't think of those pink monkeys. And you may now slowly open your eyes.
Oh, damn you. I really tried to distract myself.
But you were still smarter. You didn't focus on, don't think of pink monkeys. You at least said, Acha, let me think of yellow bananas.
Because I was trying to tell myself, don't think of that bloody damn thing.
But that's exactly how my brain works. The brain works like that. So imagine saying, I'm not going to get angry. I am not going to get angry. Dude, all that's sitting there is anger. The brain doesn't know how to lose weight.
Right.
So I must lose weight. I must lose weight. There's only weight sitting here. So replacing the negative with the alternative.
क्या करें? क्या सोचना चाहिए?
Eat healthy. So I will not.
नहीं, pink monkey का example क्या था?
So if I'm telling you, don't think of pink monkeys, don't listen to anybody who says a no. That's how it works. So there's this wonderful example. It was an experiment conducted by Yale. They had 40 bachas between the ages of 9 and 12. And the brief was, so there was a tray kept there with trays kept with glasses full of water.
Okay.
And these 40 kids were split into 2 groups, 20-20. One group was told, there was this grand staircase landing types. So one group was told that ये tray है, each of you needs to carry this tray to that table there, which is 20 steps high. So climb up those steps and deposit the tray on the table there. One group was told that जाओ इसे उठाओ और रख के आ जाओ. The other group was told that इसे उठाओ रख के आओ, but make sure you don't fall. Don't fall and don't break a glass.
थर्ड में क्या बोला? तुम लोग सारे के सारे बिल्कुल मत गिरना, इनको थोड़ा सा गिरने देना.
But guess what happened?
Yeah, of course.
So that first group went, picked up the tray and kept those glasses at the top. Second group kids fell, glasses also broke, everything, because they were so focused on not falling.
Yeah.
But there's nothing called not falling, right?
Of course.
So
especially when you're told.
So every time we say be careful versus don't fall, don't get distracted.
Right.
The moment you said don't get distracted, that's the end of being monkeys.
Yeah.
So the most powerful exercise, what this allows you to do, and especially a very conscious exercise, is that it allows you to have the pause where you're saying a no. That pause allows you to then think of the alternative. That alternative then allows you to go back into your karma and drop off a supposition, shed a limiting belief, which then steps backwards and brings you back into control. So this whole process starts with saying a yes. I've of course learnt it in reverse. If I have the next lesson, if I have a next life, I will also integrate that lesson back. But this is what I have learned so far. Being aware of your emotions and stepping into your kshetra, letting go of your limiting beliefs, trusting the process and therefore bringing it down to karma, and replacing the negative with the alternative and doing the kriya.
बहुत उम्दा जिसको
है ना?
बहुत ही मजा आया सुन के.
Thank you.
Of course, in modern day, we call it the same process about self-awareness, reflection, action. Fancy words.
Intention, attention,
That
manifestation,
so
ichha, jnana, kriya. Doesn't matter. Process it is this. Whatever,
so
however, whatever toots your horn, pick up. Whatever works for you.
So true. So I want to come back to the same question which I asked you, especially because I work with women. मेरा women के साथ काम करने का ये मकसद है क्योंकि मुझे लगता है ये space मुझे पहचानता है और मैं इस space को पहचानती हूँ. Let's put it this way. क्योंकि मैंने जब second act शुरू किया तो मैं सारे programs कर रही थी, but मुझे लगा कि women relate to my voice better, women relate to my experiences better, women relate to what I'm saying better, and of course, I think this age of also experiencing in a limitless way, I think a lot of women want to reach there. And I just feel that, okay, chalo, if I can be that catalyst, if I can hold your hand, why not? So I don't know, what is your reason? You started to work with women as well.
So very often what comes my way very often actually is this whole thing about being a woman leader and a woman CEO, etc., right? So I have a book that's coming out, by the way, later in the year. It's called Goddess in the Boardroom. And my whole quest began about 8-10 years ago, which was exactly this of saying, so I started with Sheryl Sandberg writing Lean In, and that was the start of my trigger of my journey with women. उससे पहले तो I'd been in denial of gender only, तो मतलब कोई सवाल ही नहीं था, अपना ही नहीं करना तो किसी और का कैसे accept करना है. But when I embraced myself, I'm not sure, Archana, whether I embrace myself as a woman or as the person that I am. But more of that later. When Sheryl Sandberg came out with Lean In, right, and that was the time that I was stepping into mythology, exploring gender, narratives, roles, etc. I realized that for Sheryl Sandberg to arrive in the US context was an achievement. They have no context of a woman in leadership roles, etc.
Right.
But this side of the world, we are gender agnostic to power. It doesn't matter what our leadership roles are. So that then got me thinking, and I actually met up with a whole lot of women CEOs in the Indian context about saying कि आपके leadership challenges, what are your challenges as a woman, etc., etc. The interesting thing was that every time that we came down to this, and these were CEOs from very different industries, from technology to media, to FMCG, to liquor, alcobev, etc. And they said that that conversation when you reach that stage of saying, no, woman challenges kya, etc., would break down. And after months of struggling with that, then the epiphany happened to realize that it was a null hypothesis. Their challenges weren't about women in leadership, but leadership. Right? So then we started exploring this whole thing of leadership in isolation. And that's when the truth came out, where a lot of CEOs said that, yeah, I may have guilt issues when I sack somebody at work, but somebody else may have anger issues with their team management. So these are leadership issues, don't make them gender issues.
True.
That then led further to say, yeah, differences kya hai? Matlab, how is this playing out? And that's when we had this very interesting journey where I realized that जो हमारे 3 layers होते हैं ना, conscious, subconscious, unconscious, what Freud called id ego, super ego, what Carl Jung called persona, shadows and archetypes. Neuroscientists call this the conscious, subconscious, unconscious. सांख्य में इसको हम शरीर ब्रह्म आत्मन कहते हैं etc. ये जो सबसे ऊपर वाला लेयर होता है ना, जो हमारा कॉन्शियस पर्सोना, हाउ वी अपीयर टू द वर्ल्ड, पर्सनालिटी होता है. उसके बाद ईगो होता है जिसमें आपके शैडोज होते हैं, सेल्फ इमेज होती है, और उसके बाद आपका कोर होता है. राइट. ये जो हमारे ऑल द शैडोज दैट वी हैव स्पोकन ऑफ, फियर्स, इनसिक्योरिटीज वगैरह, ये सब हमारे ईगो में रिसाइड करते हैं. क्योंकि जो कॉन्शियस है दैट्स जस्ट द शरीर, इट जस्ट परफॉर्म्स. The difference between the man and the woman, and especially in the corporate space, and I found it very fascinating, is that the man's subconscious or the ego or the shadows needs to be very strong and firm to support the weight of multiple layers on his personality. So it's like एक तो मैं हूँ,
so true.
उसके बाद उसके ऊपर उसका बर्डन होता है कि हाउ डू आई अपीयर टू द वर्ल्ड, कि एक काई आ गई, फिर यू नो हाउ द वर्ल्ड परसीव्स मी, हाउ आई मस्ट अपीयर टू द वर्ल्ड, हाउ आई वांट देम टू परसीव मी. मतलब इतनी कॉम्प्लेक्सिटी और लेयर्स हैं.
It's because they feel so responsible for everything.
Correct. We actually don't let them be. Yes. As women, we actually have it, I won't say easier, but more comfortable. So what happens with a woman is that जो ईगो वाला लेयर है वो इतना हल्का होता है, सेल्फ वाला, क्योंकि पर्सनैलिटी वही होती है जो आपको लगता है होनी चाहिए. बिल्कुल. सो द मोमेंट यू ब्रोकन थ्रू that filter of personality and broken through that filter of egos, you fall straight into the core. Whereas with a man, the burdens they are carrying is so many layers of kai.
So true.
That it needs to be a journey that happens. So 2 तरीके होते हैं ना, राइट. अगर तुम्हें सामने एक पहाड़ है और उसको क्रॉस करना है, उसको 2 तरीके होते हैं. या तो you can tunnel in from the top and reach in, right? Or you put out TNT inside and it blasts out. यही 2 तरीके हैं, right? बिल्कुल. For women, you dig that tunnel, you bore a hole, gur, and you fall straight in. Because those 2 ऊपर का surface, so assume the core is solid for both, right? That gur tunnel that comes in, the drill that comes in, falls straight into the core because these are light layers. They are kacha pahad कहते हैं इसको. But with the man, it can only happen when they spontaneously combust from within, because those layers on top are
very
really
heavy.
thick and dense. Which is why, by the way, when you see, so women learn to, therefore, in my experience, also embrace it in a more day-to-day life. You know, everyday practice, doing this, doing that. Whereas for a man, there needs to be an explosion. There needs to be a life-transforming event. There needs to be a catalyst trigger. Right? So therefore, that's been my journey with women. But having said that, and you know, that's the premise of the whole goddess in the boardroom thing as well. Whether it's our identity, so who am I पे आ जाता है, right? तो अगर मैं तुमसे पूछूं, अर्चना तुम कौन हो? What would the response be? Or if somebody else was to tell me, अर्चना कौन है, तो क्या response आएगा?
The usual response आएगा, she's a mother, she's a CEO,
she runs
she's a
this,
whatever,
she does that, she lives in such a place. That's because this concept of identity is interesting. जब तक हम 8-9-10 साल के होते हैं, our identities are a function of what we do. Right. But if you brush on time, you will be a good boy. You finish your homework, you will be a good boy. Good boys go down to the playground to play, etc. Somewhere from the time that we start adolescenting and right into our adulthood, our
And
identities.
good girls just shut up.
Good girls are meant to be
Achoo.
quiet. Good girls serve food
Sweet.
well. Good girls are well behaved, etc., etc. From the time we start adolescenting, right into our adulthood, our identity becomes a function of what we have. The jobs we have, the condos we have, the relationships we have, the club memberships we have, the education qualifications we have, the number of cars we have, the pretty sarees we have, the bags you carry, the brands you wear, the watches you have. Everything becomes a function of what you have, including job roles and titles. Right?
Of course.
Identity is about who you are when you're stripped of what you do and what you have.
Wow.
कि तुम हो कौन? If I strip you, अंदर से कौन? ये question जब हम करने लगे ना, so in fact you had asked this question, right, about who am I? Why it's an interesting question is because we hold on to some identities. They can be gender identities, race identities, education identities, sexual orientation identities, national identities. So this thing about the moment you say I am a woman, it's an identity you're holding on to.
Yeah.
So and honestly, it is much easier to shed just that. No man will ever tell you who are you to say I'm a man. I'm a hard-working man.
That's why, this female
I'm a CEO man versus a woman CEO.
Why?
So very often when this question used to come to me, कि भाई, madam, you're a woman leader. I said, you want to talk about woman or leader?
Yeah.
And then they're unrelated.
Yeah.
So leadership पे बात करो, then we will talk about strategy, vision, purpose, what this organization is for, what do I do with my people. So woman पे बात करनी है तुम्हें, तो I don't have a conversation there. But if you want to ask, we'll figure out how to achieve balanced head work. I'll say my husband steps in enough. He's the one who's present on all moms groups, etc. So Richard is saying it's very important, and again that journey begins from within you to say तुम्हारी identity क्या है. And therefore, I find it much easier to work with women.
Because they need to be worked with. I feel
I think men also need to be worked with. I think they're conditioned for listening. And for the lack of a better word, they're conditioned for listening. And because the ego and the shadow layers support a much lower burden of, the personality and persona on top, there's far greater exploration there. In fact, Archana, I'm going to say something very provocative on this one. But with all the work that we are doing with women for the last 10 years, 12 years, 20 years, the age of Kali, जो तुम कह रही हो ना, stream of consciousness emerging, it is the Kali Yuga. Right? I am actually very worried that we are empowering our girls, our women, our adolescents, career, education, step into yourself, speak up for yourself, who you are. I'm very worried about the remaining 50% that we've taken our eyes off the ball on. Right? Yes. Eventually, these women have to come back to live, to work, to be with these men. And if we don't invest, so therefore, in my mind, somewhere I don't think we should be looking at men and women at all. Yeah. But just
true.
Who you are.
I think that's what the inclusive world is all about.
I hope so. I hope so. I mean, that's my hope.
It will come. Okay, so this is a second act podcast, and of course, this question is going to be the highlight. So, what is your second act?
So, I'm already on third life, Archana.
Second act कोई वो नहीं है.
I'm trying to think of what's next. Yes, it's a metaphor for what's happening next.
Yes.
Good question. So, because I have just learned to surrender rather than controlling the narrative. So, from the chase, और ये हम physics में भी पढ़ते हैं ना कि मतलब when you are chasing something, you're creating resistance in that, right? So, जब एक बॉल एक स्विमिंग पूल के दूसरे एंड पे हो और आपको बॉल चाहिए हो, तो आप ताबड़तोड़ उसकी तरफ स्विम कर सकते हो, but it will only go away further, right? At some point, so you have to move towards that with calm, deliberate strokes, and actually before the ball stop, pause and wait for that to come to you. That's how the universe works. The universe has no concept of a vacuum. पानी और बॉल है, हमें दिख रहा है इसलिए समझ में आ रहा है. But this is exactly how the universe works, right? So if my first life was the chase, the resistance, and I will beat it, control the narrative, the second life was a figuring out, अच्छा ये environment है क्या, मतलब what is this thing? The third is in that sense not the pause, but just becoming so empty from within that I can then be that force magnifier for whatever the universe needs to deliver. So that's where I am. I run Eikam Resonance with this whole purpose. It's now even beyond passion. It is truly to help. I'm convinced that my purpose on earth is to help you become the best version of yourself. And like I said, उसमें मैं जो दे सकूँ, जो कर सकूँ, जो नैरेटिव इस्टेब्लिश कर सकूँ, और वो हर लेवल पे होगा. वो मतलब एक इंडिविजुअल के लेवल पे भी होगा, वो एक फैमिली और कम्युनिटी के लेवल पे भी होगा, और वो एक ह्यूमन लेवल पे भी होगा. तो जो कर सकूँ, मतलब वट एवर आई कैन गिव, ट्रांसफॉर्म एनर्जीज ऑन, help people find their resonance. People can help the universe find its resonance. That's what I'm hoping
Very
to
nice.
do.
And so you're in the right platform, right space, right time, as they say.
Inshallah. Tathastu.
Tathastu. So, few rapid fire questions
Yes,
before you
madam.
go. So, what is the meaning of your name? I'm very curious to know.
Again, credit to my parents, but Eika is Durga का पहला नाम. आदि शक्ति at the time of
मुझे
conception.
क्यों नहीं, मुझे कोई इस पे कोई हैरानी क्यों नहीं होगी?
So it's first name of Goddess Durga, Adi Shakti at the time of conception. And in fact, you should know what the girls are called. So my daughters are called Oishi and Tavishi.
And they are also
So Oishi is Isha theke utpanna Shakti, the power that emanates from Isha Durga is Oishi. Tavishi is हनुमान चालीसा में वो होता है ना, अष्ट सिद्धि नौ निधि के दाता.
नहीं, आपको पता है, मैं
तो जो अष्ट सिद्धियां होती हैं उसमें एक परम सिद्धि होती है, उसकी प्राप्ति में जो पावर लगती है, जो शक्ति लगती है, that is Tavishi. So we are all, as my husband says, he's aptly called Siddharth. So he says, I am the Siddharth in
I know, looks like, yeah.
power. I didn't name him.
My husband's name is Gautam too.
बताइए, बताइए.
बताइए, ये तो मतलब हाँ, कुछ तो होगी बात, right? So nice to know. Okay, so motherhood to you is?
Actually, just friendship. I've reached a stage where I enjoy my children, not because they're my children. I have, मतलब it's not hi मेरा बच्चा, not that, but I truly enjoy their company. So they give me hope. Motherhood is actually hope.
Yes.
Just hope. And joy.
Me too.
So I don't think it's about. So my mother had breast cancer some years ago. My mother. And we were discussing this in some context of, so she had the surgery. Oh, she's one fabulous woman. You must have her on Second Act. She's the one on Second Act at 68 years, and now she's 73 years of age. Wow. She's the one at that.
Yeah.
So yeah, she's a rock star. So after her, she refused to do chemo or radio or any of those things. So we were having a conversation after her surgery. Very soon after that, hafta das baad, and I was talking to her about the origins of cancer and the whole alternate healing space, and how does it emerge, how does disease happen, etc. And I think that's the only time I saw her break down, where she said, "Yeah, just because अब मुझे cancer हो गया तो तुम सब मतलब everybody has a point of view on it now." And I still remember I said, "This is not a mother-daughter conversation. It's not even a woman-to-woman conversation. So I'm having this conversation with you, person to person." And I saw that shift in her eyes, where I think that was the moment where we stopped being mother-daughter, but just people.
So nice.
Just friends, companions. And I think, I hope that's the same between my children and me. I truly, and it's not, like I said, it's not about my children or children at all, but they're just really good fun. They're friends, so they give me hope. Motherhood is hope.
Absolutely beautiful. Okay. Eikam to you is?
Purpose? Life?
Life to you is?
just joy, learning, exploring, surrender.
Resonance to you is?
That's a good one. Brilliance. Resonance is light. Resonance is sunshine. Resonance is, I don't even have probably an expression for it, but I'd love to say power, but it's not power like power, but power like sun. It's the glow, the radiance of
Wow.
brightest, best, luminous self. It is the ocean. It is it.
Second act to you is?
The truth. When you have shared what you thought, what you think you should be doing, versus when you actually embrace what you want to do, who you are and want to be.
So beautiful. So thank you, and we will now wrap up with one good shloka that you can just spread out so that we conclude this podcast.
Because this is about women, this is about you and me, it's about second acts, it's about exploring oneself. I will actually go with Sarva Mangal Mangalye, Shive Sarvartha Sadhike, Sharanye Triambake Gauri, Narayani Namostute.
Namaste. So thank you, and I hope that this was amazing, as of course Eika is herself. And this is just the beginning, I think, and there's much more coming. This is just the first part, I feel, and then there are so many, because you have multiple books coming as well this year, and I would like to hold a podcast for each book separately.
Yay!
Because this time doesn't warrant to conclude with everything else. So thank you, and may we keep discovering ourselves.
Tathastu.
Tathastu. Thank you.